The Harrington Hotel had stood at the corner of Grand Avenue and Fifth Street for 91 years, and in all that time, through 2 world wars and a depression and the complete reinvention of the city around it, it had maintained the particular quality of places that believe themselves to be above ordinary life. The carpets were thick enough to swallow sound. The chandeliers were real crystal, not imitation. The staff wore uniforms that had been designed by someone who understood that clothing was a form of architecture, that what you put on people told the world what kind of world you believed you were living in. The Harrington Hotel believed it was living in a world where certain people belonged and certain people did not. This belief, held with the quiet certainty of long money and longer tradition, had never been written down anywhere. It didn't need to be. It was embedded in the angle of the doorman's chin when he assessed arrivals. It was in the practiced neutrality of the front desk staff, the particular neutrality that was a kind of judgment wearing the costume of professionalism. It was in the air of the lobby itself, which smelled of money and flowers and something older than both. On a Thursday in September, at approximately 11:15 in the morning, a boy named Cooper James Briggs walked through the front doors of the Harrington Hotel. He was 8 years old. He had dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that were the particular gray-green of deep water and a face that, when it was not doing anything specific, had an expression of serious attentiveness, as if the world was a puzzle he was committed to understanding. He walked with a crutch. Not 2 crutches, one on his left side, the result of a condition called hemiplegic cerebral palsy that had affected the right side of his body since birth. His right arm was held slightly inward, the hand curled in the particular way of spastic hemiplegia, and his right leg moved with a hitch, a gait that was entirely his own, entirely functional, and entirely the first thing that certain people saw when they saw him. He was wearing a clean blue shirt and jeans and sneakers, good sneakers, the kind his father had taken him to pick out specifically, the kind with the extra support on the left side that his physical therapist had recommended. He was holding a birthday card in his left hand. He was 8 years old, and he'd come to the Harrington Hotel because his best friend in the entire world, a boy named Theodore Ashworth Park, was having his birthday lunch here at noon, and Cooper had saved up his allowance for 3 months to buy Theodore a present that he'd wrapped himself 3 times, because the first 2 attempts had not been satisfactory. And he had the card in his left hand because Theodore's mother had texted his father's phone to say, "Cooper is so welcome, we'd love to have him. It's on the 6th floor, the Magnolia Room." He'd arrived 15 minutes early because he was nervous, and nervous Cooper arrived early to give himself time to calibrate. He moved through the lobby with his particular gait, steady, purposeful, and the practiced confidence of a child who had long since stopped expecting the world to be perfectly configured for him and had developed instead the skill of navigating whatever configuration he found. He went to the elevator. He pressed the button. He waited. The man's name was Preston Whitfield Holt III. He was 53 years old, and he had been, for most of those years, a man who operated under the conviction that his opinions were facts, that his preferences were standards, and that the world was divided into people who understood this and people who didn't. He was the kind of wealthy that had started with a grandfather and been maintained through the particular mechanism of old money, not earned each generation but managed, grown, and protected from the friction of ordinary financial reality. He lived in a house that had been in his family since 1947. He drove a car that cost more than many people's annual salaries. He stayed at the Harrington because it was the kind of hotel that confirmed what he believed about himself. He was a tall man, thin in the maintained way of someone who had personal trainers and dietary plans and the luxury of treating his body as a project. He wore a suit on a Thursday because he wore suits on all days. His shoes were Italian and his watch was Swiss and his cufflinks had been his grandfather's. He walked through the Harrington lobby at 11:17 on a Thursday morning, and he saw the boy waiting at the elevator. He processed what he saw in the instant and unconscious way that prejudice operates, not as a considered judgment but as an automatic sorting, the kind that happens faster than thought, the kind that reveals what a person actually believes beneath what they say they believe. He saw the crutch, the curled hand, the hitched gait. He saw, in the language of his particular inner world, something that was out of place. There was a woman beside him, his assistant, a thin person named Karen who had worked for him for 6 years and had become, over those years, very skilled at seeming not to notice things she noticed. "Look at that," Preston Holt said. He said it quietly, with a particular brand of speaking not quite under one's breath that is designed to be heard by its subject. "What is this place coming to?" The elevator doors opened. Cooper stepped forward. Preston Holt stepped forward too, and in the choreography of people and elevators, came to be standing beside Cooper in the small metal space as the doors closed. He looked down at the boy. "Does someone know you're here?" he said. Cooper looked up. He was 8 years old, and he had spent 8 years learning to read adults with the accuracy of someone for whom misreading adults had consequences. He read this one. "Yes," he said. "I'm here for a birthday party. 6th floor." "A birthday party," Preston Holt repeated, with the inflection that wasn't quite incredulous and wasn't quite dismissive, but was somehow both at once. "The Magnolia Room," Cooper said carefully. Preston Holt looked at him, at the crutch, at the curled hand. Something moved through his expression that was not pity and not kindness and not anything with a generous name. "Someone should have arranged proper transportation for you," he said, "or brought you to the service entrance." Cooper looked at him. He was 8 years old. He had gray-green eyes. He had a face that, when it was not doing anything specific, was attentive and serious. Right now, it is doing something specific. He was looking at Preston Whitfield Holt III with the expression of a child who has understood exactly what has been said to him and is deciding what to do with it. The elevator reached the 6th floor. The doors opened. Cooper stepped out. He moved to the right, toward the direction of the Magnolia Room, his gait carrying him forward with the steady, purposeful quality it always had. He didn't look back. Preston Holt watched the elevator doors close. Karen, the assistant, looked at the wall in front of her with the expression of someone who had not heard anything and was very committed to that position. The birthday party for Theodore Ashworth Park was everything a birthday party at the Harrington Hotel's Magnolia Room could be. There were 8 children, including Cooper. There were balloons, real ones, the helium kind, in Theodore's favorite colors, which were green and gold, because Theodore had recently decided that these were the colors of champions, and everyone around him had adapted to this conviction. There was a cake with 3 layers and Theodore's name written in careful frosting. There was a magician who performed for 40 minutes with the particular earnest commitment of someone who genuinely believed in what they were doing. Theodore was 9 years old, today, specifically today, with a face that was open and warm and had the quality of someone for whom the world was fundamentally interesting. He'd been Cooper's best friend since 1st grade. The friendship had started because they'd been seated next to each other, and Cooper had known the answer to a question Theodore hadn't, and Theodore had said, "You're really smart," with such uncomplicated admiration that Cooper, who was accustomed to people noticing his crutch before they noticed anything else, had been so startled by being seen for a different thing first that he'd simply decided Theodore was his best friend. It was, in retrospect, one of the better decisions of his life. Cooper gave Theodore his gift, a book he'd spent weeks selecting, a massive illustrated encyclopedia of space that contained, Cooper had calculated, approximately 47 things Theodore didn't know yet which was the right number. Not too few to be interesting, not too many to be overwhelming. Theodore held it with both hands and turned pages with the focused silence of someone receiving exactly the right thing. "How did you know?" Theodore said. "You mentioned Mars 17 times in the last month," Cooper said. Theodore looked at him. "I did not count how many times I mentioned things." "I know," Cooper said. "I did." Theodore hugged him. The specific hug of a 9-year-old who meant it completely. Cooper ate 2 pieces of cake and watched the magician and laughed at things that were funny and was fully, entirely, and completely an 8-year-old boy at his best friend's birthday party for 2 hours and 20 minutes. He did not think about the elevator. He had learned, over 8 years, to put things in their correct compartment and leave them there. He had learned it from his father, who had a particular way of dealing with the world's failures of understanding. You acknowledged them, you named them accurately, and then you moved forward. You didn't carry them. Carrying them was giving them your energy, and your energy belonged to better things. But on the way home, in the car, something happened. Theodore's mother, a woman named Sandra who had always been warm to Cooper and who drove him home because his own father was finishing a job and couldn't pick him up, said something in the front seat to her husband that she didn't mean Cooper to hear. But Cooper had developed, over 8 years, the attentive quality of someone for whom missing information had consequences, and he heard it. Apparently there was some incident in the elevator with Preston Holt of all people. Barbara overheard. He said something awful to a child, something about the service entrance. Her husband said something Cooper couldn't hear. 8 years old, Sandra said. Can you imagine? Cooper looked out the window. He put it back in its compartment. But the compartment was harder to close this time. Because there was something about the service entrance said by someone else in a different context, said as a shock, said as, "Can you imagine?" There was something about hearing it from outside that made the compartment harder to seal. His father picked him up at Theodore's house at 5 o'clock. His father was a specific kind of person, and Cooper had been taking inventory of this his entire life. His name was James Anthony Briggs. He was 44 years old. He was 6'3" and built with the particular solidity of someone who had done physical work for 20 years, whose body had developed not in a gym but in the actual execution of difficult tasks. He had a beard, dark going gray at the edges, and arms covered in tattoos from wrist to shoulder, and hands that were large and calloused and moved with a precision that contradicted their size. He was the road captain of the Central Valley chapter of the Hells Angels. He'd been in the club for 18 years. Before that, he'd been in the Marines for 4 years, which had followed a childhood in which he'd grown up in a house with a father who believed that the only education that mattered was the kind you gave yourself by paying attention. He'd been paying attention ever since. He drove a truck on weekdays. He had a construction company, small and real, that built things correctly and treated its workers with the respect of someone who had been a worker and understood what that meant. On weekends and club days, he rode his Harley, a 2017 breakout that he maintained with the same careful attention he brought to everything. Cooper came out of Theodore's front door, and James watched him come down the path. The familiar gait, the crutch, and the specific way his son moved through the world that James had studied every day for 8 years with the love of someone who had decided that every detail of his child was worth knowing. Cooper got in the truck. He put his seatbelt on. He looked out the windshield. "Good party," James said. "Good party," Cooper said. James put the truck in drive. He drove for 3 minutes without saying anything. He had a gift for silence, the silence of someone who wasn't filling space with words but was paying attention to what filled it on its own. "Something happened," James said. "Not a question." Cooper looked at his father. "How do you always know?" he said. "Because I know you," James said. "And when something happens, you look out windows at things that aren't there." Cooper looked at the windshield. "I was looking at the road." "You were looking at something in the road that isn't in the road," James said. Cooper was quiet. "Tell me," James said. He said it in the particular way, not demanding, not performing patience. "Just tell me. The way you say it when you mean it." "There was a man at the hotel," Cooper said. He described it precisely. The lobby, the elevator, the words. "Someone should have arranged proper transportation for you. Or brought you to the service entrance." He said it in the flat reporting tone he'd developed for exactly this kind of thing. James drove. He drove for about 30 seconds after Cooper finished speaking. "How did you feel?" he said. "Angry," Cooper said. He was honest. He'd been raised to be honest about feelings because James believed that feelings denied became feelings that made decisions without your permission. And small. For about 30 seconds. "And then I felt angry again, a different kind." "What kind?" "The kind where you're angry because someone said something that was wrong," Cooper said. "Not just rude. Wrong. Like, factually wrong about what I am and what I deserve." "That's a good kind of angry," James said. "Is it?" "It means you know the difference between what's true and what someone's prejudice says about you." James stopped at a light. "The first kind of angry, the small feeling, that was just your body responding to being treated a certain way. That's human. The second kind, the factually wrong kind, that's your mind saying, 'No, I know better than that.'" Cooper thought about this. "He looked at me like I shouldn't be there," Cooper said. "He was wrong," James said. "Simply, completely." "I know he was wrong," Cooper said. "That's not the—" He stopped. "Dad." "Yeah. It's not that he made me feel like I don't belong. I know I belong. You've been very clear about that, and I believe it." He paused. "It's that he's probably done it to other kids. Other kids who don't have a dad who's been very clear about it. Kids who might believe him." James looked at his son. The light changed. He drove. "You're 8 years old," he said quietly. "I know," Cooper said. "And you're sitting in my truck thinking about the other kids he might have done it to." "It seems like the more important problem," Cooper said. James was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "It does." He didn't tell anyone at first. That was the part people would misunderstand later, when things became something larger than a quiet Thursday. They would say James had been looking for a reason, had been waiting for something. People who wanted to tell a simpler story would say, "Biker seeks revenge for insult to his son." But that wasn't the shape of it. The shape of it was a father who listened to his child and heard, beneath the precise reporting, the specific hurt of a boy who had been seen as less than what he was. Who had been told, in the particular cruelty of casual dismissal, that his presence in a certain space required management and apology. James went home and made dinner. He made the thing Cooper asked for, pasta with the sauce that had been James's mother's recipe, the one that required 2 hours and was absolutely worth it. He set the table. He watched his son eat. After dinner, Cooper did homework at the kitchen table, and James sat in the armchair in the adjacent room and read, and occasionally they talked about things, about a book Cooper was reading for school and about a problem in mathematics that Cooper had found interesting and James had found, after Cooper explained it, genuinely fascinating. Later, after Cooper was in bed, James sat at the kitchen table with his coffee and thought. He thought about Preston Holt. He knew the name, not personally, but culturally. The Holt family was the kind of presence in a city that you knew without knowing. Old money, old name, the particular civic prominence of people who had buildings named after them. He thought about the service entrance. He thought about his son's face when he'd said it. The flat tone of precise reporting that James knew was the controlled version of something larger. He thought about other kids. The ones Cooper had specifically mentioned. The ones who might not know better. He did not make any decisions that night. He went to bed. He woke up the next morning and drove Cooper to school and watched him go in the front door, like everyone else, and then sat in the truck for a moment. Then he called Walter. Walter Dean Morrison was 58 years old and had been the chapter president for 14 years. He was the kind of man who had accumulated authority not by seeking it, but by being the person other people naturally oriented toward in a crisis, the person whose opinion you wanted because he had the rare combination of experience and the willingness to say what he actually thought. He listened to James for the full amount of time it took James to say it. He didn't interrupt. He didn't say, "What do you want to do about it?" in the way that was really saying, "I know what you want to do about it." He listened. Then he said, "Cooper told you about the other kids." "Yeah," James said. "That's the part that matters to you." "That's the part that matters to me," James said. "And this man?" "Tell me about him," Walter said. "What you know." James told him. The name, the family, the reputation. What he'd looked up the night before. Preston Whitfield Holt III, board member of several organizations, philanthropist in the transactional sense of the word, the kind of prominent person who appeared in society pages and charity announcements and had the social immunity of someone whose continued goodwill everyone seemed invested in. "He's on the board of 3 children's charities," James said. He said it with the particular flatness of someone stating a fact that is also, simultaneously, an indictment. Walter took that in. "What are you thinking?" he said. "I'm thinking about accountability," James said. "I'm thinking about the kind of person who says that to an 8-year-old child in an elevator and then goes about his day. Who will do it again? Who has probably done it many times before and will continue to because there have been no consequences. What kind of consequences are you thinking about?" "The kind that comes from being seen," James said. "That's all. Not violence. Not threats. Being seen by people who are paying attention, doing the thing he does when he thinks nobody important is watching." Walter was quiet. "You know what will happen," Walter said, "if this becomes something." "I know," James said. "The story will be about us," Walter said. "Not about him. The story will be about bikers, and people will bring their assumptions." "Maybe," James said. "Or maybe the story will be about a man who told an 8-year-old to use the service entrance and the community that said no. That's not acceptable." Walter considered this for a long moment. "Talk to the others," he said finally. "Not as club business. As individuals who might want to know about this situation and make their own choices about it." "That's what I was going to do," James said. He made 9 phone calls over the next 2 days. He did it the way he did everything, carefully, completely, without drama. He described the situation. He said what he thought. He told each person that this was an individual choice, not a club decision, not organized action, just people who knew what had happened deciding what to do about it. The 9 people he called others. Not because James asked them to. Because that was how communities worked when they were functioning properly. Information moved, people made decisions, and the decisions compounded. By Sunday morning, James had callbacks from 53 people. By Sunday evening, it was over 100. By Monday morning, it was 174. He sat at his kitchen table with his coffee and looked at the number on his phone and thought about Cooper, who was at school, who had started the previous Friday morning with the usual routine and hadn't asked about the incident again because Cooper, like his father, knew the difference between things that needed to be carried and things that needed to be put down. James picked up his phone and called Walter. 174, he said. Walter was quiet for a moment. This got big fast, he said. I know. You know this needs to be handled right, Walter said. If it goes wrong. It won't go wrong, James said. I know the people who called back. I know what they're made of. This isn't going to be, it's not going to be what people will expect it to be. What is it going to be? Walter said. It's going to be a statement, James said. That's all. A statement, made by a lot of people standing in one place, that says, what you did was seen, and it was wrong, and the community is not going to pretend it wasn't. And Preston Holt. James thought about this. He's going to have to decide what he is, James said. That's not up to me. I'm not going to decide what he is. The moment will make that available to him. What he does with it is his. Cooper came home from school on Monday to find his father at the kitchen table with his phone and a notepad full of names and a look on his face that Cooper had learned to read accurately. Something's happening, Cooper said. Something happened last Thursday, James said. Something is responding to it. Cooper put his backpack down, came to the table, sat across from his father. Tell me, he said. James looked at his son. 8 years old, gray-green eyes, serious, attentive face. The face of someone who deserved to be told things directly. He told him. He described the calls and the response. He described the plan, not a confrontation, not aggression, but presence. A physical statement. People showed up in a specific place because a specific thing had happened, and people believed that specific things deserved specific responses. Cooper listened. The Harrington Hotel, Cooper said. Yes. When? Saturday. How many people? James looked at his notepad. More than 174, he said. It's still growing. Cooper was quiet. Dad, he said. Yeah. I need you to listen to me for a minute. James put down the notepad. I'm listening. I don't want this to be about revenge, Cooper said. He said it with the directness of someone who'd been thinking about this since he'd walked out of the elevator. I don't want it to be about making him feel bad, or making him afraid, or showing that we're bigger or tougher. What do you want it to be? James said. I want it to be about the thing I said in the truck, Cooper said. About the other kids. About the message. He looked at his father. If 174 people show up at the Harrington Hotel to yell at a rich man because he was rude to a biker's son, that's one story. That's the story about us. He paused. But if 174 people show up at the Harrington Hotel to say that a disabled child deserves to walk through the front door, that's a different story. That's the story about something that matters. James looked at his son. He looked at him for a long time. "How are you 8 years old?" he said. "You raised me," Cooper said. "I raised you right," James said. "So you know I'm right about this." "Yeah," James said. He picked up his notepad. "Yeah, you're right about this. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure everyone who's coming understands what we're there for," James said. "And that's what we're not there for." Cooper nodded. "Can I come?" he said. James looked at him. "It might be uncomfortable," he said. "There will be a tension." "It's my story," Cooper said. "I should be in it." James was quiet. "Okay," he said. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday were preparation. James spent those days in conversations. Not logistics exactly, but something more important than logistics. He talked to everyone who was coming about what Saturday was and what it was not. He was direct and specific in the way he was always direct and specific, and the people he talked to were the kind of people who responded to directness with their own. He called Shirley, the vice president of another chapter, a woman he'd known for a decade, who had a way of articulating things in public that he trusted completely. He called a man named Harold, who had 2 kids with disabilities of his own and who had been, for 20 years, an advocate in the community for disability access and awareness. He called a woman named Rosemary, who taught at the elementary school 2 blocks from the Harrington Hotel and who had been doing disability awareness programs with her students for years. He called a journalist, a specific journalist, a woman named Christine who wrote about community issues and whom he'd spoken to twice before about other things and trusted to report accurately. He didn't ask her to write anything. He told her what was happening and said she was welcome to observe and decide for herself what the story was. He also, through a sequence of calls that he would describe later as simply the right thing to do, reached Preston Whitfield, Holt III's personal assistant. He left a message. He said his name. He said what had happened in the elevator. He said that 180 people would be gathering outside the Harrington Hotel on Saturday morning. He said that he was extending an opportunity, not a threat, not an ultimatum, but an opportunity, for Preston Holt to come and say something true about what had happened. He did not tell Cooper about this call. Cooper told Theodore on Wednesday. They were at lunch, the 2 of them at the corner table they always sat at, and Theodore was reading from the Space Encyclopedia with the specific focus of someone who was not going to stop reading it until he had read all of it, which at the current rate would happen in approximately 3 weeks. "Did you hear about the thing at the hotel?" Theodore said. He said it without looking up from the book. "Yeah," Cooper said. "I was there." Theodore looked up. "You were the kid." "I'm the kid," Cooper confirmed. Theodore set down the book. He looked at Cooper with the full weight of his attention, which was the thing Theodore did when something mattered. He gave it all of him, no portion. "Are you okay?" he said. "Yes," Cooper said. "Did it?" Theodore paused. "Did it feel bad?" "For about 30 seconds," Cooper said. "Then it felt like information about him." Theodore nodded slowly. "My mom was upset. She told my dad. He said things." "What did he say?" "He said that men like Preston Holt were the reason the world was." Theodore appeared to be editing. "The reason the world was not a good place when it could be." "Your dad's right," Cooper said. "He usually is," Theodore said. "I don't always tell him that." He paused. "Cooper, are you actually okay? Because you say you are, and I believe you, but you also have a face when you're not, and I'm watching for the face." Cooper looked at him. "I'm actually okay," he said. "I got angry the right way, and my dad listened, and now something is happening." "The thing with the motorcycles?" "Yeah." Theodore looked at his encyclopedia. Back at Cooper. "Can I come Saturday?" he said. Cooper looked at him. "It's going to be a lot of people and probably loud and—" "He did it on my birthday," Theodore said. His voice was different now, not dramatic, not performing indignation, just stating a fact that had weight. "He said that to you on my birthday at my party. That means I'm involved. That means I should be there." Cooper thought about it. Thought about what his father had said, about the story being about something that matters. "I'll ask my dad," Cooper said. "I'll ask mine," Theodore said. "Maybe they can both be there." Friday night, James sat with Cooper at the kitchen table. Cooper was doing reading for school. James was looking at his phone, which kept delivering new confirmations. 182 now. Then 185. "Dad," Cooper said. "Yeah." "Tell me about the first time you were treated like I was treated on Thursday." James looked at him. "Different context," he said carefully. "I know. But you've talked about growing up and how hard it was. And people treating you like you were less than." Cooper kept his eyes on his book. "I want to know about the first time, because I think it helps me understand why this matters to you the way it does." James put his phone down. He thought about it. Not about whether to tell it, but about which one. There had been more than one. "I was 9, he said. "My dad had just left. We didn't have much money. I went to a birthday party with a gift I'd made. I made it because we couldn't afford to buy one, and I'd worked really hard on it. It was a drawing, a big one, of something the birthday kid had mentioned once that he loved." He paused. The birthday kid's mother looked at the drawing and said in front of everyone, "Oh, you made something." Like making something was inherently lesser than buying something. Like the effort I'd put in was a marker of what I lacked, not what I had. Cooper was very still. "How did that feel?" he said. "Small," James said. "For about 30 seconds. Cooper looked up from his book. Met his father's eyes. They looked at each other. "And then," Cooper said. "And then angry," James said. "The right kind." "The factually wrong kind," Cooper said. "Yeah," James said. "The kind where you know the difference between what's true and what someone's prejudice says about you." Cooper looked at his father. "We're the same," he said. "Yeah," James said. "We are. Is that why you raised me the way you did?" "That's part of it," James said. "The part where you know your own worth regardless of what anyone else decides about it. The part where you don't let their small view of you become your view of yourself." Cooper thought about this. "Preston Holt," he said. "Do you think he's ever been told he was wrong about something like this?" "I don't know," James said. "What if he hasn't?" Cooper said. "What if his whole life, the kind of person he is, has just existed, without anyone ever reflecting it back to him?" "That's possible," James said. "Then Saturday might be the first time," Cooper said. "The first time anyone has held a mirror up to it." James looked at his son. "What do you want him to see?" he said. Cooper thought about it carefully. "I want him to see that I'm a person," he said. "Not a situation that needs managing. Not a thing that should use a different entrance. A person who came to a hotel for a birthday party with a gift he'd saved for 3 months and a card he'd written by hand, and who deserved to be in that elevator exactly as much as he did. "That's what tomorrow is," James said. "Okay," Cooper said. "I'm ready." Saturday morning came clear and cold. October in its full authority. The sky a specific blue that had nothing apologetic about it, the air sharp and real, the kind of morning that made people feel the edges of themselves. James and Cooper left the house at 8:30. James had dressed carefully. His club cut over a clean dark shirt. His boots. His face was set with a particular expression of someone who has decided something completely and is walking toward it. Cooper was wearing his blue shirt again. The one from Thursday. He'd asked to wear it, and James had understood without asking why. They drove to the meeting point, a parking structure 4 blocks from the Harrington Hotel. James had coordinated with Walter, who had organized the logistics with the efficiency of someone who had run large operations before. When they pulled in, the motorcycles were already there. Not all of them. People were still arriving, but enough that the sound of it reached them before they could see it, the low, purposeful rumble of engines in an enclosed space. James parked. He and Cooper got out. Cooper stood in the parking structure and looked at what was there. He had known the numbers. 182, most recently. He had known the number intellectually. He had not prepared for the reality of 180 people in leather cuts, some of them on bikes, some of them standing in groups, the sound of their voices and their engines filling the structure with something that was not threatening but was very large and very real. He stood very still. James put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Okay," he said. "Give me a second," Cooper said. He stood there for about 20 seconds. He was taking it in, the real understanding of what had happened, what his telling of an elevator story had become in the hands of a community that had decided it mattered. Then he squared his shoulders. "Okay," he said. Walter came over. He was 60 years old and looked like the accumulated authority of all of them, not through size or performance, but through the simple fact of who he was. He crouched down to Cooper's level. "Hello, Cooper," he said. "Hello, sir," Cooper said. "Your dad told me what you said about the story that matters," Walter said. "About the other kids." "Yes," Cooper said. "I told the others," Walter said. "Every single person here knows what this is and what it's not. You understand?" "Yes," Cooper said. "This is about a statement," Walter said. "A clear one. That a child deserves dignity. That what happened to you was wrong and visible and has been seen by a community that was paying attention." "Yes," Cooper said. Walter looked at him for a moment. He was a man who had been paying attention to people for 60 years. He had a gift for recognizing things quickly. "You're something else," Walter said. "My dad raised me right," Cooper said. Walter stood up, looked at James. James looked back. "Let's go," Walter said. 182 motorcycles moved through the streets on a Saturday morning in October. The sound of it was something physical, not noise exactly, but presence, the city feeling the weight of something deliberate moving through it. People on sidewalks stopped, looked. Some of them reached for phones. Some of them just watched. They stopped on Grand Avenue, in front of the Harrington Hotel. They did not block traffic. James and Walter and the others who'd thought about logistics had been precise about this. One lane open at all times, the formation arranged on the opposite side of the street and in the parking areas adjacent. The sidewalk in front of the hotel remained clear. The motorcycles stopped. The engines went quiet. And 182 people stood on Grand Avenue on a Saturday morning in October. They held signs. Not all of them, maybe 60 or 70. The signs had been people's own choices, their own words. James had not dictated signs. He described the situation and let people bring what felt true to them. Dignity is not a luxury. My kid belongs everywhere. You don't get to decide who deserves the front door. Disability is not a problem to manage. He came to a birthday party. He deserved to be there. One sign, held by a woman James didn't recognize. She'd come from another chapter. Someone had called someone, said simply, "His name is Cooper." James saw that sign and stood very still for a moment. He found Cooper beside him and showed him. Cooper looked at the sign. His face did the thing it did when something landed somewhere important. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's the one." The people inside the Harrington Hotel had been aware that something was happening before the motorcycles stopped. Word had moved through the staff, the kind of word that moves through enclosed spaces when something is approaching that the space has no protocol for. The manager, a man named Gerald, had come to the front window and looked at the street and then had gone to make phone calls. The guests who were there Saturday morning, some of them tourists, some of them the usual Saturday clientele, had gone to windows too. The lobby had a particular quality to it, the quality of a space that has decided to maintain its composure while being confronted with something it had not scheduled. The doorman, whose name was Fred and who had been at the Harrington for 11 years, stood at his post and looked at the street. He had seen the news in the 3 days since Thursday because someone had talked, and then more people had talked, and by Friday it had been in 2 local news outlets, the story of an elevator conversation, of words said to an 8-year-old boy, and of the community that had responded. Fred had a son. The son was 26 now, but Fred remembered him at 8 years old with the clarity that parents have of the ages that mattered. He looked at the street. He looked at the sign that said, "His name is Cooper." He straightened his posture. Preston Whitfield Holt III was not at the Harrington Hotel on Saturday morning. He had received the message from his assistant, the message James had left, the description of what was coming. His assistant had delivered it with the careful neutrality of someone who had developed, over 6 years, the skill of presenting facts without editorializing. He had not responded to the message. He had called his attorney, who had said the expected things about public relations and optics and the advisability of not being present. He had sat in his kitchen on Friday evening, the kitchen of the house that had been in his family since 1947, and he had thought. He was a man who was not accustomed to thinking about himself. He was accustomed to being himself without the metacognitive step of examining what that meant. His opinions were facts. His preferences were standards. His judgments were categorically correct because they were his. But on Friday evening, something had happened. He'd watched a brief video clip, someone in the parking structure, the Saturday before the gathering, the phone camera capturing James describing the situation to a group of people. The clip had ended with James saying, he came to a birthday party. He had a gift he'd saved for 3 months. He had a card. He was 8 years old, and he was in that elevator with every right to be there, and he was told, by a specific adult, a specific man, that his presence required management and apology. That is wrong. Not complicated. Not debatable. Wrong. Preston Holt had watched this clip twice. He was not a man given to self-examination. He was not practiced at it. The machinery for it had atrophied from disuse. But something happened when he watched the clip twice. Something to do with the number 8. 8 years old. He had been 8 years old once. He had been in elevators at 8 years old. He tried to remember, tried to locate the 8-year-old self inside the 53-year-old body and ask it, what would it have felt like? He had a daughter. She was 31 now. He tried to think about her at 8 years old. He sat in the kitchen of the house his grandfather had built and thought about things he was not practiced at thinking about. On Saturday morning, at 9:45, Preston Whitfield Holt III's car pulled onto Grand Avenue. His driver had called him twice to say that the street was complicated, that there was significant presence outside the hotel, that perhaps Preston had said to drive anyway. They came around the corner onto Grand Avenue and stopped. He looked through the window. 182 people. The signs. The stillness of them. They were not marching, not chanting, not doing the things that protests sometimes did. They were simply standing there, on a Saturday morning, in their leather cuts, in the October cold, because something had happened and they had decided that something deserved to be responded to. His driver said, "Sir, should I?" "Stop the car," Preston said. He got out. He stood on the sidewalk. Several of the people in the crowd saw him. Word moved, the way word moves through crowds, a turning of heads, a reorientation of attention. He looked at the crowd. He found, in the front of it, because James had asked Cooper to stand at the front and Cooper had agreed, a boy in a blue shirt, with a crutch on his left side and a curled right hand and gray-green eyes and a face that was doing the specific thing it did when something important was happening. Looking at him directly. Preston Holt had given himself a speech on the drive over. He was a man accustomed to speeches. He was a man who had delivered remarks at charity galas and board meetings and public events, who knew the architecture of words arranged to perform a purpose. He had prepared something. He stood on the sidewalk and looked at Cooper Briggs, and he understood, immediately and completely, that the prepared thing was not the right thing. He walked across the street. The crowd made space for him, not with hostility, with the particular silence of people who were watching something happen and wanted to let it happen. He stopped in front of Cooper. He was 53 years old and Cooper was 8 years old, and the distance between them in height was large, and the distance between them in everything else was. He crouched down. It was not easy for a 53-year-old man in a suit to crouch on a street in front of 182 people. It was physically awkward. It was socially unprecedented for him. He did it anyway. He was at Cooper's level now, looking at him directly. Gray-green eyes meeting his own. "My name is Preston Holt," he said. He said it the way you'd say it to a peer. Not condescending. Not performing. Just his name. "I know," Cooper said. "What I said to you in the elevator was wrong," Preston said. He said this without the machinery of his prepared speech. Without the architecture. Just the fact of it, stated plainly. It was wrong, and it was unkind, and it reflected a way of seeing the world that I am ashamed of. Cooper looked at him. "I'm telling you this directly because it happened directly," Preston said. "And because you deserve to hear it directly." Cooper was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said. Preston looked at him. "That's all you have to say?" "No," Cooper said. "I have more to say. But I want to say it properly." He shifted his weight on his crutch with the practiced economy of the motion. "Mr. Holt, I'm not standing here because I want you to feel bad. I'm standing here because you said something that was wrong and because there are other kids who don't have a dad who's been clear with them about their own worth, who might have believed you. I'm standing here for them." Preston Holt looked at this 8-year-old boy. He looked at him for a long time. "How old are you?" he said. "8," Cooper said. "I turned 8 in July. I've been using a crutch since I was 2. I have cerebral palsy. I'm good at math and history, and I know the Latin names of 47 birds, and my best friend's favorite subject is space, and I saved for 3 months to buy him a birthday present." He paused. "That's who I am. Not the crutch. Not the entrance I'm supposed to use. That's who I am." Behind them, in the crowd, someone made a sound that was not quite a sound. Something released, collective, involuntary. Preston Holt, on one knee on a street in October, looked at a boy who was telling him who he was. He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "I didn't before. I understand now." "Good," Cooper said. He said it simply. Not triumphant. Not withholding. Just good. The acknowledgement of something true. Preston Holt stood up. His knees complained about it. He turned to face the crowd. 182 people. He thought about his prepared speech. He discarded it. "I said something in an elevator on Thursday," he said. His voice carried. It had always carried, trained to carry, but the content was different from anything it had carried before. "I said it to a child who was going to his friend's birthday party. I said it because I made an assumption, a thoughtless, unkind, wrong assumption, about who belonged in that elevator and who didn't." He stopped. "There is no version of that assumption that was acceptable. There is no explanation that makes it less wrong. I am offering no explanation. I'm offering an acknowledgement that I was wrong in a specific, visible, public way, because it happened in a specific, visible, public way." He looked at Cooper. "And I'm offering this child an apology," he said. "Not a performed one. A real one, which means it comes with a commitment to be a different kind of person. A person who sees who is actually in front of them." The crowd was very still. James was standing behind Cooper, slightly to the left. He had not moved or spoken since Preston Holt had crossed the street. He had let his son handle it, because his son had asked to be in his own story, and his son was handling it the way James had always believed he would handle things, with clarity and with the specific dignity of someone who knew his own worth. Preston Holt looked at James. "I don't expect," he started. "Good," James said. "Because the point of this wasn't your expectation." He said it without anger, with the flat fact of it. "The point was what my son said, and what the people behind me said. That we see what happened. That we're not going to pretend we didn't." Preston Holt nodded. He looked at the signs. "His name is Cooper." The journalist was there. Christine. She had a camera and a notebook and the professional composure of someone who had reported on things that mattered for 20 years. She would write, in her piece that ran Sunday morning, that the gathering outside the Harrington Hotel on Saturday was the most unusual event she had covered in 20 years of local journalism. Not because of the number of people or the motorcycles or the striking visual of leather and chrome outside a 91-year-old luxury hotel. Because of the shape of it. "It was not angry," she wrote. "That was the thing that startled me most. I expected anger. I've covered protests and demonstrations for 2 decades, and they are usually in some central way, about anger, justified anger, necessary anger, but anger. This was not that. This was a community statement, made with the calm authority of people who had decided something mattered and were saying so with their bodies and their presence. It was the difference between yelling and speaking plainly. The difference between reaction and intention. At the center of it was a boy named Cooper Briggs, 8 years old, who told a man twice his age and 6 times his net worth exactly who he was, in 3 sentences, on a street corner, in front of his father's community and a journalist and the October sky. He said, "That's who I am. Not the crutch. Not the entrance I'm supposed to use. I've been a journalist for 20 years. I've interviewed senators and scientists and people in the middle of disasters. I have never been more certain that I was watching someone important do something important than when I was watching an 8-year-old boy tell a grown man the truth about himself." She would also write about James, about the phone calls and the 182 people and the 9 days between Thursday and Saturday, and the way a community had mobilized not around revenge but around a statement. She would quote Walter, who said, "We don't do symbolic things here. We do real things." This was a real response to a real wrong. She would quote Harold, who had 2 disabled children of his own and who had said, "What Cooper experienced in that elevator is not unusual. It happens in schools and hospitals and hotels and grocery stores. What's unusual is that it was seen and responded to by this many people in this specific way. What's unusual is that a community said, 'No, we're paying attention. We're not going to pretend this is okay.'" She would quote Rosemary, the elementary school teacher, who said she was going to bring Cooper to her class, if he was willing, to talk to her students. Not about his disability. About how he knew who he was. She would not quote Cooper directly, because his father had asked her not to quote an 8-year-old without careful consideration, and she had agreed, and instead she described him. His blue shirt and his crutch and his gray-green eyes and the particular quality of his face when he was telling the truth. "Serious," she wrote. "Entirely serious. The way children are serious when they know exactly what they are doing and why." Sunday passed. Monday came with school. Cooper went to school on Monday morning with his backpack and his crutch and his face that was, when it was not doing anything specific, serious and attentive. He went through the front door, like everyone else. Theodore was waiting at their corner table. He had the Space Encyclopedia open. He was reading about Saturn's rings with the focused silence of someone performing an important task. He looked up when Cooper sat down. "I saw the article," Theodore said. "Yeah," Cooper said. "Christine used the word important twice," Theodore said. "Once about you." "I know," Cooper said. Theodore looked at him. The full-weight look. "Are you okay?" "Yes," Cooper said. "Are you?" Theodore considered this. "I've been thinking about what you said in the elevator," he said. "What you told that man about who you are. And I've been thinking about whether I would have been able to do that," Theodore said. "Whether I would have known what to say." He paused. "I don't think I would have. I think I would have been too scared." "You might surprise yourself," Cooper said. "Maybe," Theodore said. "But I don't think that's the same kind of knowing you have." He looked at the encyclopedia. "You know yourself really well. Better than most people." Cooper thought about this. About where it came from, the years of having to know himself in order to not be defined by other people's definitions. The specific knowledge that came from needing it. "It's practice," he said. "You practice it long enough, and it becomes a thing you have. How do you practice it? Cooper thought about his father, about the kitchen table and the pasta sauce and the conversations and the particular way James listened and what he said after. About the morning of Saturday and the way James had put his hand on his shoulder in the parking structure and said, "Okay," and meant it completely. "Someone teaches you," he said. "Someone who already knows who they are, who shows you how." Theodore nodded slowly. "Your dad," he said. "My dad," Cooper confirmed. Theodore was quiet for a moment. He turned a page of the encyclopedia. Turned it back. "I'm glad you're my friend," he said. He said it simply, the way he said things that were true and didn't need decoration. "Me too," Cooper said. They ate lunch. They talked about Saturn's rings, which Cooper found more interesting the more Theodore explained them. They argued about whether the Space Encyclopedia had an adequate entry on the Kuiper Belt, which Theodore felt was seriously underrepresented and Cooper agreed was worth looking into. Outside the cafeteria windows, October continued its work, the sky its Pacific blue, the light doing the long slow thing of fall, everything moving toward winter in its gradual and unstoppable way. 2 weeks after Saturday, James got a letter. Not an email. A letter in an envelope on heavy stationery. The handwriting was careful and slightly old-fashioned. He opened it at the kitchen table. "Mr. Briggs, I am writing this by hand because what I want to say seems to require the effort of that. Typing is easy. Writing is not. I want this to cost me something in the way that saying something true should cost you something. I have spent 2 weeks thinking about the things your son said to me on Saturday. Not because I am trying to process a public relations incident. Because I have been trying to understand how an 8-year-old boy knew exactly who he was, with a clarity I cannot claim for myself at 53. I have come to understand that the answer is that someone taught him, that you taught him, that you gave him the gift, the most essential gift, of knowing that who he is not negotiable, that his worth is not contingent on someone else's willingness to see it. I did not have that. I had other things, money, position, and the social confidence of someone who has never had to defend his right to be in a room. What I did not have was the knowledge of myself that comes from being seen clearly by the people who love you. The result of not having that knowledge is visible in what I said in an elevator on a Thursday in October. It is visible in the way I have moved through the world for 53 years, making assumptions, holding categories, seeing the surface of people, and calling it the whole. I am telling you this not because I expect anything from you or your son. I expect nothing. I am telling you this because your son said he was standing there for the other kids, the ones who might have believed me. I want you to know that what happened has had a consequence beyond the public statement. It has had a consequence in me. I cannot promise what that consequence will look like. I can tell you it is real. Your son told me his name. His name is Cooper. I will not forget it. With genuine respect. Preston Whitfield, Holt 3. James read the letter twice. He sat at the kitchen table for a while. Then he went to Cooper's room and knocked. "Come in," Cooper said. James sat on the edge of the bed. Cooper was at his desk, doing homework, the serious attentive face doing its thing. "I want to read you something," James said. He read the letter. Cooper listened without interrupting. When James finished, Cooper was quiet for a moment. "Do you believe him?" James said. Cooper thought about it carefully. "I think he means it right now," he said. Whether he keeps meaning it is something we'll see." "That's a reasonable position," James said. "Do you believe him?" Cooper said. "I think he wrote the letter," James said. "By hand. On purpose. That takes something." "Yeah," Cooper said. He looked at his homework. Back at his father. "Can I keep the letter?" "It's yours," James said. "Not because I want to gloat," Cooper said quickly. "I know," James said. "Because I want to have something real that shows." He stopped. Tried again. "Because I was there for the other kids. The ones who might have believed him. And if there were kids on the other side too, if what happened made someone like him actually think, then that matters. That's the story about something that matters." James looked at his son. He thought about the woman at the birthday party 35 years ago who had looked at his handmade drawing and said, "Oh, you made something." He thought about the 30 seconds of feeling small. He thought about the right kind of angry. He thought about the specific work of raising a child, not just teaching skills and facts and behaviors, but teaching the deeper thing, the thing that made it possible to stand in an elevator and then on a street and say, "That's who I am." "You know what you did," James said. "What?" "You changed something," James said. "I don't know how much. I don't know the full shape of it. But you went to a hotel for a birthday party, and something happened, and instead of carrying it alone, you told me. Instead of letting me be angry for you, you were clear about what this should be. You stood on a street in front of 182 people, and you said, 'I'm standing here for the other kids.' You're 8 years old, and you changed something." Cooper looked at his father. "We changed something," he said. "Together." "Yeah," James said. "Together." Cooper looked at the letter in James's hand. "Keep it for me until I'm older," he said. "I'll want to read it again when I'm older and understand more of it." "Okay," James said. "Dad." "Yeah." "Thank you," Cooper said, "for hearing me when I told you, for not just being angry, for letting me be in my own story." James looked at his son. 8 years old, gray-green eyes, the serious attentive face doing the thing it did when it was being completely honest. "You know what the best part of being your dad is?" James said. "What?" "Every day I find out something new about who you are," James said. "And every day it's better than what I already knew." Cooper looked at his homework. Back at his father. Something moved through his face, not the controlled, precise reporting version, but the 8-year-old version, the one that was allowed to just be what it was. He smiled. It was a good smile. It was James's mother's smile. Somehow, the specific shape of it, the way it went all the way to the eyes. It was a smile that had been earned. "Okay," Cooper said. "I have homework." "I know," James said. He got up. Went to the door. "Dad," Cooper said. "Yeah." "Can we have pasta tonight? The real kind. The one that takes 2 hours." James looked at his son. "Yeah," he said. "We can have pasta tonight." The 2 hours it took to make the pasta were ordinary hours. James stood in the kitchen and cooked, and Cooper did his homework at the kitchen table, and they talked about things, about homework and space and the 47 birds and whether the Kuiper Belt deserved more attention than it got in most encyclopedias. They talked about Theodore and about school and about a mathematics problem that had made Cooper think about something he couldn't quite articulate yet, but was certain was interesting. The kitchen smelled like his mother's recipe. Like Sunday mornings. like the specific domesticity of people who belong somewhere together. Outside, October continued. The days were getting shorter. The light was doing the thing it did before winter, the long golden slant of afternoons that looked like something settling. Cooper set the table while James finished the sauce. He did it carefully, the way he did things, his left hand managing the placement, the economy of motion he'd developed over 8 years, and the specific grace of someone who had learned to do everything with precision because precision was available even when ease wasn't. He put out 2 plates. 2 glasses. The napkins were folded in the way James had taught him, simple and clean. He stood back and looked at the table. "Looks good," James said from the stove. "It's just a table," Cooper said. "No such thing as just," James said. Cooper considered this. It was the kind of thing his father said that sounded simple and was not. "Because how you do things says something about what you think they're worth," Cooper said. "Yeah," James said. "I set the table like it matters because it matters," Cooper said. "And because you matter," James said. "And I matter. And dinner together matters." Cooper looked at the table. "Yeah," he said. James brought the pasta to the table, and they sat down, and the steam rose from the bowl, and the kitchen light was warm against the October dark outside the window, and they were just a father and a son eating dinner. The father was 54 years old with calloused hands and a gray-edged beard and 18 years of a club on his back, and before that 4 years of military service, and before that a childhood that had required him to learn early the difference between what he was worth and what the world sometimes said he was worth. The son was 8 years old with gray-green eyes and a crutch propped against the chair beside him, and the particular gift of knowing himself clearly that comes from being raised by someone who loved him enough to give it. They were, in this moment and in all the moments that had led to it and all the moments that would follow from it, exactly who they were. No entrance had been designated for them. No version of the world that believed itself above ordinary life had the authority to decide otherwise. They were here. They were home. They were themselves. Cooper took a bite of pasta. "The sauce is right tonight," he said. "Yeah," James said. "It is." "Your mom's recipe," Cooper said. "Yeah." "She would have liked being here." James looked at his son. "She would have been proud of you," he said. "This week. She would have been proud." Cooper was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. He said it not with sadness, or not only with sadness. With the acceptance of someone who had been taught how to hold loss without letting it hollow you out, who had been taught that the people you love continue to be present in the ways you carry them. "Tell me something about her," Cooper said. "Something I haven't heard." James thought about it. "She used to argue with the television," he said. "Every single news program. Like the people on screen could hear her." Cooper looked at him. "Did she ever win?" "Every time," James said. "As far as she was concerned." Cooper laughed. The surprised, genuine laugh of someone who did not know that was coming. James watched his son laugh and thought about 8 years. About the specific 8 years of this specific person coming into being beside him, day by day, laugh by laugh, argument by argument, moment by ordinary extraordinary moment. He thought about an elevator on a Thursday in October. About a man who had looked at his son and seen the crutch before he saw the person. About 91 years of a hotel that believed certain people didn't belong. About a boy in a blue shirt who had stepped off the elevator and kept walking. He thought about 182 people on a Saturday morning, standing in the October cold with signs that said, "Dignity is not a luxury," and "His name is Cooper." He thought about a letter written by hand on heavy stationery, written because the person who wrote it understood that saying something true should cost you something. He thought about what Cooper had said, "I want to be in my own story." He was. He absolutely was. And the story, the real one, not the simple one people would want to tell, was not about revenge or intimidation or the power of a community over an individual. It was about what Cooper had said it was about. It was about a boy who walked through the front door. It was about knowing who you are when someone tries to tell you otherwise. It was about a father who listened, really listened, who gave his son not just his presence but his full weight attention, who made space for his son's voice in his own story, and who understood that the best thing a parent could give was not protection from a difficult world but the internal architecture to navigate it. It was about 182 people who had been paying attention. It was about standing, not with raised fists, not with a threat, just standing, in a space you have every right to be in, with your full self, with your name, with the particular and irreducible fact of your existence, which belongs everywhere you are. His name is Cooper. He belonged in that elevator. He belongs everywhere he goes. James picked up his fork. Outside, October was doing what it did. The stars were becoming visible, the sky darkening from blue to black, the specific October dark that was clean and cold and completely itself. Inside, the kitchen was warm. "More pasta," James said. "Yes," Cooper said. He held out his plate. "Please."